Hello and welcome to the Flick and the Frame. It's just me today, just Ryan. The Flick or the Frame. I don't know. We still haven't quite figured that one out yet. Subscribe for further updates on that topic. Now, I've had some time to myself recently, and I've been thinking, and then I got lost in existential thought and decided to have a lie down. Then I woke up and I started thinking some more, which threw me down this rabbit hole, a rabbit hole in which I have discovered a hidden cinematic universe linking nearly 30 movies you didn't know were connected. And it's continuing to this day. And this video aims to bring you down that same rabbit hole here with me. I'm down here too. Hello. Now, if you are a fan of big brands, franchise movies, giant robots, Draculas, ancient curses, futuristic warfare, early 2000s comedy, reboots, action figures, straight-to-DVD prequels, hockey, Arthurian legend, funny last names, dreams, animated spin-off shows, sandstorms, conspiracy theories, one man talking to himself and slowly going crazy, failed attempts at cinematic universes, The Rock, then this video might be for you, and you should leave a like. Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes of what this video is about, I just want to address a few concerns you might have along the way. Now, you might think to yourself, Ryan, these connections you've made are only tangentially linked. Ryan, this isn't enough in-canon evidence to support these claims. Ryan, a lot of the evidence you've presented is based off hearsay and speculation. Ryan, tomato is an essential part of the burger. And to that I say, no. The flavor and texture of tomato overpowers the other elements of the burger. You might as well be eating a tomato between two slices of bread. You just put a little bit of ketchup on there and you'll be fine. As for the other concerns, I also say no, because I believe in this deep down in my heart. And maybe once you're finished with the video, you will too. But maybe not your heart, maybe like another body part, like, I don't know, your small intestine or your elbow. I don't know. It's a subjective experience, all right? Just finish the video. Right, so let's get into it. Now, the story of one of the biggest cinematic universes you didn't know about begins with one man. Well, several men, but we'll get into it. That man is Lorenzo di Bonaventura. So let's start at the beginning. In 1980, Bonaventura began a river rafting business in Maine. Oh, wait, hold up. That's too early. Okay, yeah, flash forward a few years. Yeah, right there. All right, stop. Okay, 1989, he joins Warner Brothers as a production executive. While there, he works on over 130 projects, including The Matrix and the Harry Potter franchise films. In 2002, he leaves Warner Brothers and forms his own production company and partners with Paramount. And on the other side of that, we have Don Murphy and Tom DeSanto. Now, these guys were looking to shop around a G.I. Joe film. They went to Hasbro, asked for the rights to G.I. Joe, and due to the Iraq War occurring at the time, Hasbro was like, maybe it's not the best time for the G.I. Joes to be running around in the desert. And they gave them the rights to the Transformers films for free. So DeSanto and Murphy set off to find a studio that would help them produce their Transformers film. They actually got turned down by a lot of different studios because of lack of interest in the property. To be fair, this was the type of shit they were producing around the time.
Let's do it!
But Bonaventura was gung-ho for the idea. He thought with visual effects improving over the last few years, this could definitely be done. So Murphy, DeSanto, and now Bonaventura, they got Steven Spielberg involved. They convinced Michael Bay to direct, and we got our first live-action Transformers film in 2007. Now, this is essentially where the universe kind of begins, but we'll get into the timeline and where the universe officially begins a little bit later on. So they would make the first Transformers movie, and they would go on to produce 4 sequels. We have Transformers, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, Transformers Dark of the Moon, Age of Extinction, yeah, and The Last Knight. Now, from these 5 Transformers films, we actually got a few unofficial spin-offs out of this universe. Now, the first of which, spinning out of Transformers 2007, is the Friday the 13th reboot from 2009. Now, these movies are connected because they feature the same character, Trent DeMarco, as portrayed by Travis Van Winkle. He shows up in Transformers. He also is a main character in the Friday the 13th 13th reboot. So this implies that he was running around in the Transformers movie and then he got bored or whatever with all that and then decided to go hang out at Camp Crystal Lake and get murdered. Now, the Friday the 13th movie is a reboot of that franchise, right? It was also produced by Michael Bay, who directed and produced the Transformers films. That movie came out in 2009. Now, a year later, in 2010, we also got the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot with Jack Earl Haley. This movie is also counted in our cinematic universe because from 2003, we got Freddy vs. Jason, which firmly establishes that the characters exist in the same continuity. While they may never meet in the new continuity because they did bad box office wise and nobody cared about the reboots, they still technically exist in the same universe despite being in a rebooted timeline. Think about it this way. If the DC Universe reboots in the comics, Batman and Superman don't end up in separate universes. They stay in the same universe. The Nightmare on Elm Street remake was also produced by Michael Bay, giving further evidence as to how it exists in the same cinematic universe. Now then we get Revenge of the Fallen in 2009, we get Dark of the Moon in 2011. Dark of the Moon spins off another movie from the franchise. It's actually more of a prequel to the Transformers films. Now Alan Tudyk has confirmed in interviews that his character in Transformers Dark of the Moon, Dutch Gearhart, is the same character as the one he plays in the 2000s comedy film 28 Days.
How much of your character in 28 Days was based off of improv? Because it couldn't have been written that way.
No, actually, it wasn't.
Really?
He was written as a gay German character. Now, when I did it again in Transformers, same guy.
So, because they're the same character, that implies they're in the same universe. So 28 Days from 2000, starring Sandra Bullock, is a prequel to Transformers 2007. All right, so our first side of the cinematic universe, we have the Transformers side. So that includes the 5 Transformers films, the prequel 28 Days, and the spin-offs Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Now, we know that the Transformers films have continued past the Michael Bay directed films. We got Bumblebee, we got Transformers Rise of the Beast, and we also got Transformers 1. Now, we're not going to count these in our cinematic universe because they exist in a separate continuity, okay? We're only counting films in our cinematic universe that exist within the same continuity, and that's these movies right here. So this universe is kind of split up into two main factions, all right? Two sides of the same coin. So we have our Transformers side and all those films. Now on the other side of that coin, we have the G.I. Joe universe. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. There are no definitive links to the Transformers franchise within these movies. And to that I say, shut up. Let me explain. I have a few points to dispel your argument. First of all, both properties are owned by Hasbro. Second, both franchises are produced by Lorenzo di Bonaventura, who has expressed interest in creating a shared G.I. Joe Transformers universe. The G.I. Joe and Transformers comic books crossed over in Marvel in 1987. Currently, the G.I. Joe and Transformers comics are running simultaneously in the Robert Kirkman-led Energon universe. And while it is in a separate continuity, Transformers Rise of the Beast did confirm the existence of the G.I. Joe within the Transformers universe. So while there are no definitive links to the franchise being together, there's also no evidence that claims they aren't. Right, so on the other side of the Transformers G.I. Joe cinematic universe, we have the first 2 live-action G.I. Joe films, G.I. Joe The Rise of Cobra, G.I. Joe Retaliation, and we are not counting G.I. Joe Origin Legacy Snake Eyes prequel series movie thing. That's in a separate continuity like the most recent Transformers films. And now you might be thinking, well, is that it? Is that your cinematic universe that I've never heard of? That's lame.
But wait! There's more!
So Rise of Cobra was directed by Stephen Sommers and includes a cameo from Brendan Fraser, who plays Sergeant Stone. Now, it was confirmed that Brendan Fraser's character, Sergeant Stone, is a descendant of Rick O'Connell. If that name sounds familiar, it's because it's the lead protagonist of the Mummy movies from the late 90s to mid 2000s, which definitively links the Mummy and the G.I. Joe franchise. That includes the Mummy Returns, the Mummy animated series, and the Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, and also the Mummy 2017 reboot starring Tom Cruise. The Mummy 2017 is considered canon within the Mummy verse, if you want to call it that, because the Book of Amun-Ra turns up in this film, which was confirmed to be the same book from the original continuity, linking the 90s Mummy movie to the current Mummy movie, or, well, the one that came out 8 years ago, whatever. So with the Mummy franchise being added into our cinematic universe, this also includes the spin-off films, The Scorpion King. Beginning with Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior, Scorpion King 3, Battle for Redemption, Scorpion King 4, Quest for Power, and Scorpion King 5, Book of Souls, all of which are prequels to the Mummy movies, which are prequels to the Transformers and G.I. Joe movies. And for those of you who don't know, The Mummy 2017 is also a part of a shared cinematic universe, the Dark Universe. You probably remember that picture with Johnny Depp and Javier Bardem and all those people from the supposed Dark Universe that Universal is trying to launch. Yep. That's the picture. This universe began in the early 2010s. Universal approached Robert Orci and Alex Kurtzman to begin plans for a shared cinematic universe using Universal's monster characters. Coincidentally, Robert Orci and Alex Kurtzman also wrote the first 2 Transformers films. Oh, look at that. Now, the Dark Universe includes several films. Dracula Untold, which was considered a false start by the studio, but in that picture, do you see a Dracula? I don't think so. There's still room to include a Luke Evans Dracula. How about right there? Yeah, perfect. So Dracula Untold is the first in the Dark Universe franchise. Then we get The Mummy 2017, which we've already linked. Also The Invisible Man from 2020, Renfield, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, Abigail, and the most recent Wolfman movie. Now within this series of movies, we can actually make a few more connections. From the Invisible Man movie from 2020, we get the character Adrian Griffin, who is the Invisible Man. He's also the CEO of Cobalt, which was one of the companies that contributed to the human-computer augmentation featured in the film Upgrade, also from the same director. So Upgrade is linked to our cinematic universe here. And in Abigail, which came out in 2024, we see in the mansion where the movie takes place a portrait of Victor Le Domas from the Domas family, which was featured in the film Ready or Not from the same directors, linking Ready or Not to our cinematic universe as well. So on the G.I. Joe side of the cinematic universe, we have the Scorpion King series, the Mummy series, which links to the Dark Universe and its adjacent films, and are prequels to the G.I. Joe movies. Wow, that's a lot of movies, 28 to be exact. Let's lay it out in chronological order. All right, so starting at the beginning, we're taking it all the way back to 3047 BC, roughly. I did the math in my head. I'm not sure if that's right, but before 3067 BC, we got the Scorpion King 2, which is a prequel to the first Scorpion King movie. Following that, we get the Scorpion King in 3067 BC, followed by the Scorpion King 3, Scorpion King 4, and Scorpion King 5. Shortly after that, we get the events of the prologue of Mummy Returns, where The Rock eats a scorpion. Now, we're going to skip a few thousand years and we're going to jump into the 15th century. That's where Dracula Untold takes place. And Dracula's doing big bad dukins on everybody. We're going to skip another few thousand years and jump to 1897. That's where The Last Voyage of the Demeter takes place. Dracula gets on a boat and goes on a cruise or whatever. It's also the same year Sam Witwicky's great-great-grandfather, Archibald Witwicky, discovered Megatron in the Arctic Circle. A few years later, in 1926, we get the Mummy movies. Brendan Fraser releases a Mummy Curse. Following that, with the Mummy Returns in 1933. Then in 1938, that's where the Mummy animated series takes place. Presumably between this time period, Transformers are fighting Nazis or whatever happens in that movie. Then in 1946, we get the end of the Rick O'Connell Mummy movies with Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Now, there's a bit of lost time in here. When I was doing research into when exactly they took place, some of them did take place in specific time frames. Some of them just said modern day. So I'm just going to attach the year that it came out to the quote-unquote modern day films. So we're going to jump from 1946 to 2000, where we get the movie 28 Days. A few years later, in 2007, we got the events of Transformers happening. Then a couple years later, Trent DeMarco goes off to Camp Crystal Lake for the Friday the 13th reboot. That same year, the events of Revenge of the Fallen happen. Next year, in 2010, we get the events of the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. Then in 2011, the events of Dark of the Moon happen. Following that up in 2014, we get the events of Age of Extinction. Then in 2017, we finally end the Bayverse Transformers movies with The Last Knight. Also in 2017, we get the events of the rebooted Mummy movie taking place concurrently with that. It's a very interesting universe to be in 2017. That following year in 2018, we get the events of Upgrade happening. So clearly the Invisible Man is beginning his human augmentation experimenting. In 2019, we get the events of Ready or Not occurring, followed by the events of G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra in 2020 and the Invisible Man also in 2020. And if you look closely, the Invisible Man is actually in G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. Look, there he is. A couple years later, we get the events of G.I. Joe Retaliation occurring in 2022 after the Nanite Wars. Then in 2023, we get the events of Renfield, following up from what Dracula's been doing for the past, 100 years? And in 2024, we get the events of Abigail, and now we are all caught up to the modern day in 2025 with the events of Wolfman. And that's our cinematic universe. 28 films going from the Scorpion King movies all the way to the most recent Wolfman adaptation, including the Transformers, the G.I. Joe, the Mummy, and the rest of the Universal Monster characters. Thanks for sticking with me on the journey there. I appreciate you watching. If there's any movies I missed or left out or that you think could also be considered in this hidden cinematic universe, please leave your comments down below. Or if you think I'm wrong and I'm an idiot, leave a comment. Let me know. Do you think the ancient Egyptians knew that they were building energon drainers into the pyramids? Tell me. And next time you're thinking about ordering a burger, think about this video and say, hold the tomato, please. Thanks again for watching. Please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. We will see you next time.